Law enforcement and government agencies struggle with parking citations, often because no one will pay them. Boots or other devices are costly, and they invite confrontation when implied and later removed by enforcing employees. With Tire Tag, you can avoid many hurdles and ultimately promote public safety and revenue collection. To learn more, visit tiretag.com. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities.
Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Today I have a Q&A based episode, and this feels like a throwback to when I started Blue Grit Wellness, and in many ways before I started Blue Grit Wellness, because of so much of my passion in first responder wellness and mindset was really down in the fitness and nutrition niche. But I got a question from an up-and-coming applicant. It sounds like he's getting everything dialed in right now. And it really has to do with nutrition and fitness, right? And as I go, more prongs of our wellness, I suppose, pillars or the spokes of our wellness wheel, whether it's fitness, nutrition, the other aspects, sleep, that will be a factor here too. But his question had to do with how he can gain weight. And I don't think of myself as a hard gainer. In my youth, I'm certainly not these days. A lot of us can find ourselves in that place in life where the metabolism is not revving up as high as it used to. Certainly. However, for him, he's 30. He's very slim. I don't know how tall he is, but he shared that he's about 135 pounds. And he is looking to put on some mass through messaging, very clear that he's doing it in an intentional, healthy way. I have shared that I was very much part of the unhealthy bulk cycle in college / post-college, and I definitely had my fast food, slow body phase as a newer cop working graveyard and crushing that fourth meal or that fifth meal. I think many of you will understand the reference of what I'm talking about. I was buying and consuming, but it didn't serve me, right? It wasn't making me optimal for doing the job, handling myself, and handling the threats or the resistive subjects, whatever you want to call it there. But for this gentleman that reached out, I wanted to kind of give some thoughts to share with him more specifically, but then go beyond that. As we've mentioned, and I've pitched him a lot of feedback and ideas, I figured why not? Because over the years, this has been a theme or a thing, certainly for certain people that they think they're eating a lot, they're working out pretty avidly, and they're just not putting on muscle mass or weight. And so this is a not overly scripted, not overly thought out response, just to have people thinking about a lot of the things I would initially suggest them start tackling. The first thing I asked him about was, what he's eating currently, right? And the first thing I asked him, and I would ask anybody with this type of situation, is to assess and monitor what you're actively consuming, and then also what you're expending, right? So activity level. This dude is a postal carrier, and it sounds like he's a legitimate postal carrier because he said he logs over 10 miles, maybe like 11 miles on a work day. And so that is a lot of freaking walking, right? So he's very active. So that is to say that he needs to put in more calories. Now, a calorie is not a calorie in the sense that some people say that phrase. Not all calories are created equal, and I will stand behind that. We all react differently to different types of nutrients and calorie sources. There's macronutrients, fat, protein, carbs that we may handle better or more ideally than others. But there's also micronutrients, and that's the actual nutrition, right? Like vitamins, minerals, all these things is part of food. And so, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of like, if it fits your macros. But I think that most people that actually do some legitimate studying on it recognize that that is not the whole picture, but it can get us closer to understanding the quote unquote like calorie balance equation. So first off, I would suggest he and others consider what they're bringing in to their bodies. And a lot of people through the years, not him, but a lot of people through the years have said that they eat so much freaking food, and they can't imagine how they can't gain more weight. And I ask them what they eat, and they can't really say specifically. They just say a lot. And so this is coming off of years of studying a lot of articles, podcasts, message boards, like bodybuilder, all this stuff. Athletes, really, you have to know what you're putting in, and you don't know that unless you track it. And there are different ways to track it. One of my first suggestions I'll give out is use an app. And you can approximate things if you're consistent in how you approximate things, because we're not getting you to a certain body fat percentage for getting physique ready or something like that. But if you have roughly, let's say, like 6 ounces of chicken breast or chicken thigh per meal 3 times a day that you take to work with about a cup of rice, I think that's sufficient for recognizing how much you're bringing in, how much you're taking on as far as a recognized baseline, right? Of course, you can get more accurate with weighing it after cooking, yada, yada, right? Get down to the gram if you so choose, but it's not necessary, right? So you can approximate it. And when you have enough practice weighing or measuring things, you may get decent at like eyeballing it. But I will just say, without going down that rabbit hole more, approximate your food and actually log it in an app, or at least in notes. And if you're eating the same thing every workday and you're eating generally the same thing on days off, that's probably more tenable than if you're eating all these different meals and you're eating out and you're, kind of doing this ready-made food. MyFitnessPal being an example, historically I had used when I was getting a grasp of calories and macros, but use something, start with like a free thing and see how it works for you. Start tracking what you're eating and see where your calories come in. And although calories are not everything, that can be something that you toggle to see how it's going, with your weight. If you're sitting, let's say, like you're averaging about 2,000 calories a day over the course of a week, let's take it up to 2,300. Shoot, let's take it up to 2,500, see how that feels. A lot of times, people that have a hard time gaining weight are simply kind of like fast moving. They're, self-described as kind of being, active body, active mind. They don't sit still well, ADD kind of types that are constantly doing something. And with that energy type or that kind of personality type, a lot of times they actually forget to eat and they think that they're eating because they have just a huge meal and then it goes hours and hours and hours. And so I would encourage having easy to consume calories and snacks. And so everyone is different and what you easily consume a lot of might be different. But for some, eating like half a jar of nuts or, a couple scoops of peanut butter and a banana is way easier than having like chicken and rice, right? So we want to make sure that we're having the nutrition in our quote unquote balanced meals, but also think about ways that we can have a lot of calories really quickly, really fast. And similarly themed, how you cut out a lot of calories. Most nutrition experts will suggest you remove the caloric liquids like your mochaccino, your, quote unquote healthy smoothie that you got at a smoothie shop that actually has 40 grams of sugar in it, like additional sugar. No, like you can easily consume, 12 to 20 ounces of a liquid with a ton of calories, and that could be good or bad. So in this scenario, if you are trying to gain weight, it can be really good. And so one of the first things I'll recommend people do is add a high calorie shake to the beginning and end of their day. It's super easy because you don't really have to think about it. You just become autopilot in making this thing upon rising, especially if you're one of those, well, I'm not really hungry when I wake up, so I just start my day and I go a few hours before I get hungry. If your goal is to put on weight, then ignore that and consume the calories. So start of the day, whether you make coffee or not, make your smoothie at the same time. Here's some of the things I'll immediately throw out to make it easy to stack up the calories. So I would start with, if you're dairy tolerant or you love dairy, full fat cream. Okay, full fat cream. I would also consider, if you're not dairy tolerant, the replacement being coconut cream. So not coconut milk from the carton, but coconut cream from the can. So that is like a can of that stuff is like 800 calories. And so you could have one of those with other stuff, or you could have half of one. So that's already 400 calories, 2 scoops of peanut butter. So that's, a tablespoon. I want to say tablespoon. Whatever the serving size of peanut butter is, like 100 calories. A fat scoop is probably going to be 150. So let's do 2 of those. Now we're talking 300 calories. Now we're at 700 calories. 1 or 2 scoops of protein, which would be like 1 to 120 calories. And then you get a bunch of protein, maybe some collagen, right? That's another 10 calories, whatever. That's more nominal. But then I'd also add in things like, the fruit you like. So if you want fruit, then throw in a banana. It's going to start getting really thick. So make sure you have enough like almond milk or water to blend with all this. Also, you could do quick cooking oats, right? It might sound weird to add some of these things in, but they will pulverize with a decent blender, like a NutriBullet or what have you, Ninja product, Vitamix, whatever. Decent blender will chop that stuff up to granules that you can actually like drink. And yes, it'll be thick, so you want a big vessel to drink it out of. But just think about like everything I just said, whether it's a banana or like half an avocado, like that gets it also super thick and creamy, especially if you want like a lower carb thing. But regardless, everything I've just said easily goes over 1,000 calories. And so now we're talking about a shake that is half of what a lot of people consume in a day. And so now you've increased your daily caloric intake by roughly 30%. But you did hear me say it twice, right? So if you're a real hard gainer and you are like, I'm talking, you are so thin and you are basically, you have like that 6-pack and like no fat on your body just from existing in moderate exercise. Like, yes, you can toggle it up. I don't want to wreck your digestion or, anything like that. Again, this is not medical advice, as you should know. But consider having one of these in the day at the start of your day. You can have it, on your way to the gym. You can have it on your way to work. You can keep sipping on it over the course of a couple hours, throw some ice cubes in there, right? You could also have one of these at the end of your day, like as you're winding down. That could affect sleep. So I will throw that caveat in. But if your goal right now is to gain weight, think about how you can inject this 1,000 to 2,000 calories a day. And of course, you can toggle down the amount of what I just said, and then that's 500 calories shakes in a day. So start somewhere, start gradual, see what works for you. But that is like a lot of easy ways you can add calories. Also, snacks, right? So things that I have definitely overeaten that are healthy too are nuts, like salted roasted nuts, dried fruit. Be careful with that because it can really, make you bloat. But I'll just say if you are a shift worker, like a postal worker or like a cop, and you're trying to gain weight, have that stuff in your patrol bag or in your bag next to you. Bars, right? Like more nutritionally minded, more whole food based bars, like your RX bars and whatnot. Like, each of those bars is about, I want to say like 200 calories, maybe 220, depending on the flavor. So these things do add up. So consider how you can just add simply those things. Now, when you think about the square meals, this dude talked about how he has a lot of chicken and rice and broccoli. So that's very bodybuilder, very healthy. But if he's trying to gain weight and it's not happening, dress that stuff up, right? Switch out the chicken breast with chicken thighs. If you handle fat okay, like go with some drumsticks, right? So fattier meat is going to add a little bit. I'm a huge proponent of chicken thighs anyway, just because the boneless, skinless chicken thighs, barely more fat for like exponentially more flavor than chicken breast. So that's great. Not to nerd out, but like, your dark meat does have more vitamin K. And so there is benefit to that, if it suits you. But just consider where you can add in more calories. Put a drizzle of olive oil, like a tablespoon or two, on top of all that rice and vegetables and chicken. Like, why not? It's not many people argue that olive oil is not healthy as far as sources of fat. So each tablespoon of oil is generally about 100 calories. So now you're adding on a couple hundred to like every meal of your, 3 or 4 square meals. Fantastic, right? Just be aware that if you're having like a really high fat diet, all of a sudden that can really mess with your digestion. So nothing super significant overnight. Just play with things and consider these different things. So I've said a lot about food, and that is the main focus of this as far as tips. I did kind of poke at sleep earlier. So oftentimes not having optimal sleep will prevent us from our fitness or body composition goals, whatever they are. So consider that, especially if you are in this desire to bulk or lean bulk. You're putting in time at the gym. You need to put in time recovering, and sleep is the most important part of that. Overtraining can be a thing, especially for those lean. Like if you are continually tearing the muscle, like you're not giving it time to rebuild. And so consider body part splits. One of the most common ones that's recommended for hard gainers is to lift about twice or 3 times a week max, and to do like hit full body or go back and forth between upper and lower, right? So none of this really, traditional bodybuilder split where it's like chest, back, arms, shoulders, abs, legs, repeat. No, a lot of the methodology or the mindset behind that is to really hit all the muscle groups or most of them, and then rest for a couple days because we really want to maximize that time that it's building back up. And of course, workout advice is like anything, like polarizing and like a religion. So just consider that. That's from a lot of sources I absorbed through the years. That generally a lot of leaner built, naturally lean hard gainers, quote unquote, do find a lot of success with that type of approach. And he's already walking a ton, right? So his activity, as some people call it, NEAT, non-exercise. Shoot, what is it? Non-exercise. Okay, I had to look it up. Sorry. NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, right? So that's not working out, just the calories you're burning by existing. And sometimes that is because you fidget a lot or because you walk around a lot. And you could probably qualify it as that because this is his job. He doesn't have a choice of whether he walks all that time, but it's great. So let's just feed it with other types of activity. He talked about weights and body weight. Weight training is tricky. You don't need heavy weights to achieve like a certain result. A lot of it comes down to the resistance, the rate of exertion, or perceived exertion and time under tension. And so that's really just how hard are your muscles working. So if you think about grabbing like, 25-pound dumbbells, and if you can press them overhead, whatever times, let's just say 10. Okay. If you do it really slowly, you might not be able to do 10. You might only be able to do 7. But if you do it really slowly, if you are moving that 25-pounder up over a count of 10 seconds and coming back down over a count of 10 seconds, your arms are probably gonna be shaking. I'm talking to some of you stronger guys and gals out there too. And this is a nod to high intensity training, not HIIT, not high intensity interval training, but just high intensity training. And there's a whole school of bodybuilders that really take this quote unquote 1 rep approach to their physique and muscle building. Like some of these guys are huge, and gals, I'm sure. But I was familiar with the guys that kind of popularized this. And the idea is after a few warm up sets, they literally have like one set where they do like 10 reps, but they're going so slow up and so slow down that they are burning their muscle and they are frying their nervous system with just simply that quote unquote 1 set per muscle group. It got really popular, especially with like workout machines, like Nautilus type style training, because you're on a fixed plane and you're not going to drop like the bench. You're not going to drop the barbell on yourself with the chest machine. But just knowing that it's possible gives a nod to the fact that you don't need heavy weight to build muscle. There's a lot of people that are pretty jacked off of just body weight exercises, but they progressively make it harder depending on hand placement, their time under tension, right? The cadence and the count or rep scheme of things, how they break it down. So play with that. A lot of free resources, a lot of YouTube to dive into those different ideas. So do you need a ton of weights? No. However, some people do respond better to heavier weight at fewer reps. That's, I believe from everything I've heard and read, could be genetic factors to that. Whether you do better with like 5 sets of 5, building muscle and strength, or whether you do better at like 3 sets of 10 or sets of 20 to 25. I mean, that's pretty individualized, but a lot of studies infer that you can achieve muscle growth and strength gain from varied rep schemes. So we talked about nutrition, we talked about calories, we talked about rest, sleep, and we talked about training. Don't overtrain. If you are, well, really for any goals, and I will tell you, I have overtrained in years past. Listen to your body. But if you're trying to build muscle and strength, if you're trying to burn fat, lose weight, overtraining generally not helpful to that. Like anything, doing too much of something is a good way to burn out and find non-sustainable effects and results. So those are some quick and dirty tips that I would throw out and invite people to think about for gaining weight. I will say this, and there are a lot of awesome officers, first responders that are smaller. I think that what is important to say, and I will tag it onto this episode, is yes, size can be helpful, but relative strength I would take in my partner's days of the week, and also skill and ability, right? And so that is to say that there let's just say, there's officers that are having a hard time putting on muscle or based on their frame, or they just so choose not to. A lot of people that are functionally fit, um, that are much smaller than me are going to do a better job dummy dragging my butt to cover than some people that are just arbitrarily bigger. Maybe they're bigger, stronger, but maybe they lack the core strength or the leg drive or the tenacity or just the cardio to like grab me and drag me. Maybe they can kind of deadlift me once or twice and then they're gassed. And what good is that for me? Not. It's really not. So it is my nudge and nod for people to think about relative strength, just how you can improve your fitness. And if you do dial in certain practices, know that likely you can get good results in physiology, but also skill, right? And that's where I think it's very relevant to talk about defensive tactics, ground fighting control, grip strength, core strength, just general musculature and just fitness is extremely helpful. Also, mobility and flexibility, knowing how to navigate your body with gear around people that are bigger and stronger. Shout out to Doug White. He is or has been on the show at the time this airs. He talks about the bear. And the bear is that archetype or that notion of there's always someone bigger and badder and stronger than you out there. I mean, it's just a fact of the matter. So rather than trying to be the biggest, baddest person, I recognize that there's always someone bigger and badder. But are you going to be able to bring the right mixture of fitness, training, mental fortitude to beat the bear? And this is not like a nod to my success as much as it's a nod to like my agency culture and my beat partners and what I've been able to take on as my own, but also what training I've been provided through actual tactics and mindset. But I've never been in a fight that I lost. And sometimes we don't fight fair. Sometimes there's multiple people on one. But all to say that even when I had to go one-on-one for a short stint, I wasn't losing the battle and I've been able to handle myself. And I feel like a dinosaur even talking about it, because that's not been my assignment, working patrol for quite some time, like boots on the ground per se. But it is a nod to say that if I were to do my career differently, I would spend a lot more time on the mat than I did in the gym. And that is to say both are important, but that is what I would encourage those coming in or those wanting to take on the next level and make themselves the most proficient and optimal they can be. Certainly, that framework feeds mindset and operational ability and actual physical ability in so many ways. They all just kind of parlay into each other. So that is my answer to your question and then some. So thank you for the question, man. Appreciate the feedback and those that follow along, of course, and support and share the show. So without further, I will bid you all a safe next shift, safe day, safe week, fantastic month, and more.
Hey, Grit Nation, I got a couple things I'm really excited to share with you. The first is that the free newsletter, is now live. All you got to do is go to bluegritwellness.com to subscribe. It is basically a summary of everything good and gritty for the week, including some exclusive content specifically on the newsletter. That'll include wellness information, nutrition, things that you ask, Q&A, as well as updates about Blue Grit, offerings, news, things that'll help you out. Next order of business. For years, I've been asked what kind of nutritional supplements I use because I've been into learning about health, nutrition, fitness for so long. And for years, I landed on NutriCost. And it's only a recent thing that I've been an affiliate, but now I get to pass the savings on to you. So if you go to NutriCost.com, use code BLUEGRIT, that's just BLUEGRIT, you get 10% off. Literally just a couple items, you get free shipping. And the reason why I found it was because it was always the best quality for the best value. So I always recommend people look at the ingredient list, look out for things like sucralose. It has the lowest amount of unnatural ingredients if you're looking for that kind of thing, whether it's your whey protein isolate, which I toggle on and off of, or organic vegan protein to cut down on different chemicals that I just generally like to avoid. It's not just protein, it's creatine and minerals, vitamins, things like L-theanine and magnesium, which I use regularly to help my nervous system power down. It aids rest and recovery, promoting better sleep. So whatever it is, go to NutriCost.com and you can just enter the code BLUEGRIT to get your 10% off. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.